Hello there and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, and today we're talking about an improvement I've made to the Hydroponic Growers Toolkit. So, I talked about this on a previous episode, and I'll put the link in the description for the podcast. But also, if you email me or if you email Utrema, then on the bottom in my email signature, there is the link to the Hydroponic Toolkit. Anyway, and what it is basically it's a Google Sheets document, and it contains all the conversions that you might need if you're running a hydroponic setup. So ppm to percentages, moles to milligrams, liquids, gallons to litres, litres to gallons, potassium to potassium hydroxide, potassium oxide, and things like this. So all those sorts of conversions. It's got useful links. So working out symptoms of nutrient deficiency, when is it going to be the last frost if you're growing outdoors or in a polytunnel, all the news articles that news websites, all the trade shows that I go to, the links to this podcast, the links to all the products that we sell or that we recommend. And then we have a feed chart, and then we have different information about different hydroponic systems. But the improvement that and we also have an equipment checklist, and we list all the equipment that a new grower, a beginner would require, the cost, and some comments about that, and then the equipment that an expert would need. And then the new sheet on the toolkit is a checklist, and a checklist of all the tasks that you have to do on a daily basis in a hydroponic system. The tasks that you have to do when you're irrigating your crop or when you're changing the irrigation, the weekly tasks, the monthly tasks, or the tasks you have to do at the end of harvest. So we'll quickly go through those because they're really interesting, and you might have some additions or thoughts about those. So you can find these on the toolkit, so check that link out anyway. But the first one is check for pests, disease, or disorders. That's a daily task. Always look on the underside of the leaves with the hand lens to check for mites and thrips and downy mildew, things like this. Then the other one that I think you should check on a daily basis is the dampness of the grow media, regardless of whatever grow media you're using. A visual check, and just by touching it, you'll sense the temperature and therefore how wet it is. Next one is check the current maximum and minimum temperature and humidity, either using a max and min thermometer or hygrometer or a data logger, some sort of one of those fairly cheap and cheerful data loggers you can get now. So that's it. For flowering plants, stroke a leaf to stimulate a systemic defense response and reduce stretch. So as an alternative to growth regulators, if you're producing a tall plant like legal cannabis or chrysanthemums or something like this, then you can stroke the leaves to stimulate a systemic defense response. That's a daily task. You've got to empty dehumidifiers of their water. That's a daily task. Making sure they're kept clean and prevent things like legionnaires developing in them and algae buildup. And then obviously fill humidifiers with water, preferably reverse osmosis or RO water. Then when you're irrigating, always, or when you're looking at the irrigation system, always check the EC, the electrical conductivity, check the pH of the feed, and calibrate the pen before you use it. That's always important. The one that's always mixed, but I think is absolutely essential, is check outflow EC if you're using some sort of system that when they come out of the roots, whether that's run to waste or recirculatory, always check the outflow EC. Remove outflow liquid with a wet and dry vacuum cleaner if you're growing in a grow room in a domestic situation. Don't just allow the outflow to stay there and be reabsorbed, because your EC values will increase and increase and increase. So that's very, very important and is an absolute noob mistake. Weekly tasks is to prune, pinch and train the stems. Don't do this all at once, especially in things like tomatoes, because you'll get cracking of your fruit, because you'll get an osmotic shock where suddenly the plants have got loads of water coming from the roots. And so pruning, pinching and training, minimal amount of stress every day rather than one big stress at once, which can cause deleterious effects. It can cause hermaphrodization in a lot of dioecious plants. Check for cuttings, check the roots of your cuttings on a weekly basis. So if you've taken some cuttings, check whether any roots are formed on a weekly basis on a few plants. Don't check them daily because you will damage the root primordia, and don't check every cutting. Do this weekly at most. It doesn't require to be done more than that. And then on a weekly basis, check the conditions in your reservoir tanks, check for algae, precipitation, mosquitoes, things like this. So just check everything's hunky-dory in there. And then monthly tasks, or at the end of the harvest, if it's not continuous, dust the lights and the fans. So especially LEDs, turn them off, and the heat sinks, the metal that dissipates the heat, that needs to be dusted to make sure that it extends the life. If you don't dust them, they will run at a higher temperature and their lifespan will go down. The amount of light they can emit will be reduced dramatically over time. And the same for fans. You don't want dusty fans circulating dust around your grow room. Once you've harvested, wash all the surfaces, pots, pipes, saucers and secateurs, and then sterilize. Washing and sterilizing are two completely different and separate things. Washing, you use like soap, and that removes material. Sterilization doesn't remove material, but it does kill the microbes. If you just wash, then it won't be sterile. And if you just sterilize, then the microbes can come back and just feed off the dead plant material and biofilms and scum that you haven't removed. So clean, then sterilize. Thoroughly clean the reservoir and the tanks and the pipes, then sterilize. I've forgotten that twice. Possibly reservoir and surfaces, two different things. Replenish any sticky traps. That's not just because they get full of fungus gnats and thrips and things like this and aphids. It's also because you can then monitor the new grow. So if you put a new grow in there, fresh sticky traps, you can see if they suddenly become an issue. You're using old sticky traps, then not only do they wear out and not become as sticky, you can't see whether there's been a problem. So you can use them for monitoring and control if you replenish your sticky traps. And then if you're using carbon filters, give them a good shake and assess whether they need to be replenished or renewed. Shaking them just to refresh the carbon around the whole circular cylinder. So they are the essential, absolute bare minimum hydroponic checklists for, and some of those tasks, if you're in a really large grow, they won't all be your responsibilities. One of those tasks might be one person's job full time. I once went to a tour of the Ford factory in Halewood in Liverpool, and my father asked one of the guys who was pressing a button how long he'd been on there for, because he looked really bored, like he was expecting him to say 2 hours or something like that. And he said 25 years. So it might be somebody's job in a very large hydroponic system, say in Holland, in a large tomato grow, or down at Planet Earth, to check the EC values in the tanks and that on the pH levels. And that might be their job all day, every day. You don't know. So the bigger it gets, the more people will be involved in this, and the less tasks, the less of a jack of all trades you'd have to be. So that is the checklist. It's part of the toolkit. It's free. It's open access. It's not gatekeeped or anything like this. Anyone can use it. You don't have to be using gold leaf, or as it's called in the UK, liquid gold, or any of our fertilizers. These apply, they're generic. They apply to everything. Everything apart from the feed chart applies to any type of hydroponic grow in any crop. I'm thinking of doing a series on soil, looking at people who grow indoors or in greenhouses in pots rather than directly in the soil, talking about things like living soil, soil texture, soil properties, soil chemistry. But be interesting to know your thoughts on that. Do you want to keep it completely soilless, or do you want to introduce some episodes on soil? So any feedback you've got on that, then let me know, and we can introduce some of those in the next few weeks. That's because many people in hydroponics or indoor growing do grow in soil, even though they call it hydroponics. It's a bit of a grey area. So thanks very much for listening today. As I say, if you can leave a review or share this podcast, it does really help me, because I'm doing this on a Sunday evening, just driven all the way back from Scotland, and it's just mainly there to help the community, the hydroponics community, and grow. And hopefully we can be a thriving industry in the years to come. As I said in yesterday's episode, there's a couple of setbacks we've had recently. So let's stay positive. Or if you can do anything in hydroponics in August, it's always good, because it's really hot, really difficult to grow hydroponically. And also everyone's on holiday. So sales and grow shops and things like this are down, and people are on holiday with their kids, so they don't want to be messing around setting up grow rooms. So if you start anything in August, it's always going to be improved. It's always going to get better. It's never any worse than it is in August. So think positively, and I'll see you again tomorrow on Hydroponics Daily. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.